Hey guys, welcome back to the Mike Urban Show. Today I have Diana DiZoglio on, and it's our state auditor. That's who we have today. And obviously my colleague Annie, I have next to me here. So I guess we'll start with, what do you do? What does your role entail?
Great question. I am your state auditor, and before everybody just turns off the video right now, I do not audit any of you. I don't audit your personal finances. I'm not the IRS. I'm not the Department of Revenue. I actually audit state government, state agencies, and state departments for you, the taxpayers of Massachusetts. And we do so to try to make government work better. We look at processes, procedures in different state entities. We look at the performance of different programs, if they're performing well, if they're not performing so well. And our office writes reports about what we find in these different state entities with the mission of making government work better for those it's meant to serve, all of those who are hopefully watching today. And happy to chat a little bit about what's been going on in our office lately. But I am the state's chief accountability officer.
Yes.
It's my responsibility to help to manage that office. And essentially, as the people's auditor, I serve as a liaison between the community and the office to make sure that our office is focusing on what is important to you as the taxpayers, that we're auditing what's relevant to you, and that we're looking at different issues of importance so that we can work together to ensure that there is accountability and transparency in our state government.
I mean, that is a lot, right? But you don't necessarily deal with money, correct? Like per se, it's more procedures and so on and so forth,
so
right?
We do look at financial aspects, but we don't do what's called financial audits per se, in terms of, you know, if somebody has a forensic financial audit conducted, they're throwing out a wide net. They're looking at every single last decimal point. Mm-hmm. Our office actually is called to, by law, conduct what's called performance audits in accordance with what's called generally accepted government auditing standards set forward by the Government Accountability Office. And we look at those processes, procedures, and yes, there are some financial components. We do look at the receipts as well, but we do so in what's called a performance audit, looking at efficiencies, inefficiencies, and how to make sure that there's programmatic integrity, that systems are actually functioning.
Yes.
And if they're not, we go in and we make recommendations for how to make them function better.
So we know what you do and what you can do. What are you having trouble with right now? What can't you do?
So the elephant in the room
Yes.
Is that although voters recently in November approved at a 72% margin an audit of our state legislature, the state legislature continues to adamantly oppose such efforts by my office. We have only asked for financial documents and state contracts up to this point, and they are calling it unconstitutional, personally attacking me, of course. That comes with the territory. But really just continuing to engage in a campaign, which, excuse me, I'm sorry, it's that time of year.
It's
the
okay, do
allergies
your
are acting
thing.
up. But really just engaging in a continued campaign that we already won. So we already won the campaign for increased transparency and accountability from our legislature through this audit conducted by my office. But legislators are continuing this conversation, and they're holding committee hearings on this soon, which is essentially going to serve as a kangaroo court where they are going to consider the constitutionality of this and then make a determination themselves on what they believe to be true about the constitutionality, rather than allowing this audit to happen, or if they do have a disagreement about constitutionality, taking this to the Supreme Judicial Court. The legislature has the right to ask for an opinion from the SJC, but they refuse to do so because they want to control this conversation. They want to get away with simply violating the law that everybody just voted for, at least 72% of us.
Right.
And they want to do so with no accountability. So essentially, we've been trying everything that we can in the Office of State Auditor to get this done, but we have been hitting roadblock after roadblock after roadblock So I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to chat with you about this today and to get the word out that we need folks to continue to be really loud about this and contact your legislators and anybody you know up on Beacon Hill and tell them to follow the law.
Follow through, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is what the people voted for. Speaking of which, how did it even get to the point of being something, like, who passed this to the point where it could be voted on? Like, how did it get from point A to point B if they were not going to allow it to go through anyway? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So we have a ballot process here in Massachusetts that is, it's actually, it's something I've become really educated about over the course of the last year and a half or so. I led the charge on this ballot question. And actually, the reason why we even had to have a ballot question, let me back up here. We'll just give a historical background since we do have an hour here today. So buckle up, everybody. We're going to get educated about this issue. Our office, the Office of State Auditor, since its inception in 1849, always audited the state legislature.
So this isn't new.
No.
This isn't something new.
No, it is not. And as much as I appreciate people's encouragement, saying, wow, you know, this is very forward thinking and all that, thank you very much. I didn't come up with this idea.
Yes.
I cannot take credit for it. This was actually something that was always the case. And when I ran for office, when I ran for state auditor, I had conversations with people about this, and in almost all of these conversations around the state, when I was asking people what was important to them, they said, we really want you to audit the state legislature. And I said, okay, well, I will commit to auditing the state legislature. Fast forward, I get elected. I go in to conduct this audit of the state legislature that I had committed to doing, that voters asked me to do. And I very transparently made that part of my campaign platform. This wasn't something anybody was surprised with. Went to go implement this audit and start the audit process, and they started to push back, even though we had audited the state legislature over 100 other times throughout history.
When was the last time, if you don't mind me
interrupting? In the early 1990s, actually, there was an audit report done of... at the time, there was a court officer who was said to have fraudulently been collecting funds from two different accounts, allegedly. And Joe DiNucci at the time was actually tapped by the Attorney General at the time. So Joe DiNucci was a former state auditor. He was tapped by the former Attorney General, who had this issue referred to the Attorney General's office, but the Attorney General said, this isn't under my purview, this is under the state auditor's purview.
Yeah.
You should go in and you should audit this because it has to do with state taxpayer dollars and fraud and abuse in the system. The auditor at the time went in, they audited the situation, and they found that there was fraud occurring and the situation was dealt with. Subsequently, the Speaker of the House at that time and other subsequent speakers said, essentially, you're not auditing me. Former auditor Joe DiNucci, another Italian-American, of course, boxer as well, he, went to go in to conduct this audit, and they had an argument over it, the former speaker and former auditor DiNucci. And DiNucci pushed back on the speaker at the time, it was Speaker Flaherty at the time, and said, this is my job. It's my job to do an audit. And respectfully, Mr. Speaker, you need to let me conduct this audit. But kept getting pushback. So the auditor at the time went to the AG, asked for the AG's support. The AG essentially said, well, the law is, up for interpretation. The Speaker has one interpretation. You have another. So Auditor DiNucci filed a bill to try to clarify the law to make it so that there was no confusion about the fact that the legislature was to be audited. Obviously, though, however, the Speaker's in charge of what legislation passes and doesn't pass, so the bill was never passed into law. And I also think it's interesting to note that since that time period, following that time period, I should say, there was a time of unprecedented scandal and corruption that followed that, where 3 speakers were indicted, and there have been there's been challenge after challenge since that time period. So definitely, can't say causal or whatever, but definitely a correlation with the ending of these audits and a period of corruption and scandal.
Today's episode is brought to you by Uplift Provisions. Now, if you care about how you show up, whether it's for work, a night out, or just everyday life, you need to check out this company. They make absolutely legit grooming products. They're local here in Massachusetts, and they give back to a great cause. I use their signature pomade daily. Holds great, smells great, doesn't have that greasy feeling, washes out easy. The best part, we're offering a 15% off site-wide with my promo code URBAN15%. Go to upliftprovisionco.com and use the code URBAN15%. That's URBAN15%. Look good, feel good, get it done.
I want to reflect back a minute. So when you were running for this position and you asked the public what they want you to do, what they see you doing, so on and so forth, why do you think they asked for the audit in the first place?
So folks are fed up with not having a seat at the table. They're fed up with finding out about really important issues only after the decisions have been made that are impacting them. And there is a significant lack of trust in the government in general right now, but particularly in Massachusetts, where we are frequently ranked as one of the least, if not the least transparent state legislatures in the entire nation. Our state legislature is not subject to the public records law. They're not subject to the open meeting law that they require that our cities and towns follow.
How are they bypassing that? Because
they will exempt themselves through law. So they vote on the law, they create the laws, and what they will do is they will create these laws for others to follow and exempt themselves from having to follow those same laws. So folks are fed up with that. They're fed up with the hypocrisy. They're fed up with not having access to what's happening. And they're fed up with decisions being made that they're not really allowed to be part of. You know, committee hearings have happened throughout the years where legislators are able to take votes that have been hidden from the general public without those votes being recorded. So folks are left to wonder how their legislator voted on a particular topic. And, you know, you will have some legislators who do their best to make sure they're transparent and they're telling people. And that's great and good for those particular legislators. But that is not reflected across the board. And a lot of legislators don't do that. And frankly, folks shouldn't have to call their legislator and seek out these things in today's day and age where we have technological advances, you know, we have websites and we have ways to electronically access this type of information to make sure that there is some level of accountability. We were recently also, Mike, it's important to mention, voted the least effective or ranked the least effective state legislature in the entire nation on top of already having been ranked as the least transparent. So we have a lot of work to do here in Massachusetts where, for as forward-thinking as we are on a lot of different issues, on this, we continue to fall short and rank dead last in the nation.
It takes forever to pass bills here in Massachusetts, and then you find out that they're up until the middle of the night trying to get things to go through. How do the people even have time to go through the bills and read the bills and, like, do all of these things, right?
They don't. It's
crazy
and I will be real with you, and this is one of the things that I've spoken about for years. There's actually a group of former legislators, and we've sort of all banded together, Republicans and Democrats alike, in just, you know, recovering from having served in the legislature.
Yeah.
Because while we may have agreements or disagreements on whatever the, you know, political debate of the day is, what we share is our mutual desire to make sure that the current legislative body is able to actually do their jobs without all of this power continuing to be centralized in the hands of just a few. A lot of legislators feel hostage, you know, feel like they're held hostage in a situation where the Speaker, the Senate President, and a few of their henchmen and henchwomen, their loyalists, are able to control every aspect of the budget, every aspect about what gets passed and doesn't get passed. And if you deviate from doing what they told you to do or told you to say, you yourself are punished. But it's not just you who's punished, it's your community that also gets punished. So your community will lose that grant opportunity. You will not get your bill passed. It's not just, and we do hear folks, you know, criticizing folks for, well, they're just concerned about their office or their staff or they're this or they're that. They're this or they're that. Yes, there are some who are just concerned about that.
Sure.
And those folks are not in it for the right reasons. And there needs to be accountability there. There are a lot of others, however, who are in the legislature who do mean well, who feel like their hands are tied, because if they vote for something like a legislative audit as their constituents demanded, they are fearful that they will face certain retaliation. They'll lose their chairmanship. They'll lose the salary that comes along with that, the stipend, I should say, that comes along with that, which is significant. And on top of it, it's not just them who will suffer. They're also likely to see, that addiction resource center in their community lose funds, that transportation project in their community lose funds, that bill that they've been working to pass for years and years on end, working with different advocacy groups. That won't see the light of day because the Speaker or the Senate President will make sure that that bill gets killed, or that the credit for passing that bill goes to somebody else, and that senator or representative is dismissed, ignored, and disenfranchised and bullied out of doing the right thing. So it's very culty in the state legislature. And if you do not obey the powers that be, that act more like dictators than leaders these days, then you will face retaliation most likely. And that is what a lot of legislators fear. And that's really why you don't see a lot of the things that we vote for getting action taken. They're more fearful of the Speaker and Senate President's retaliation than they are of their constituents' displeasure with their actions. And that tells you a lot about what's going on in that building right now.
I want to tell you a little bit about how I feel just about how you're talking, okay? First of all, I think it's, and everybody should know this, I think it's very commendable that you're here and you're talking about these things, because the fact is there's a lot of people out there that they're either lawmakers or they're politicians, whatever they are, and they don't have the guts in order to do what you're doing right now, right? Which I think is highly commendable because of the, as you just said, the retaliation, the so on and so forth. But the fact is, the policymakers, the lawmakers, they work for the people, right? So, I mean, you're advocating for the people, which I think is highly, highly commendable. And I'm happy we're having this conversation. I think there's going to be a lot of people out there that really appreciate you coming on today. I really do. Following up with a question, how come, and I already know the answer to the question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. In terms of the audit itself, why hasn't somebody tried to draft a bill or a policy or whatever needs to be done to bypass the Constitution here, to allow the audit? You see what I'm asking? Even if that bill or policy or whatever needs to be done, even if it got voted down, because in my opinion, I think what happens is we voted for the audit, we're not getting the audit. People are upset about that. If there's a bill or something that sort of, circumvents the Massachusetts Constitution and that gets voted down or doesn't see the light of day, I feel like that would just provide more ammunition for what's happening. How come nobody has proposed that?
So again, there's a lot of fear in the legislature right now. And in order to file a bill and then pass it, you have to find somebody who's willing to do some of this stuff, right? And even folks that have been willing to do some of this work to ensure that the audit law is followed, those proposals have gotten shot down. There was an amendment that was filed on the rules package recently in the House of Representatives, and all it said, y'all, was that the audit law was going to be followed by the House of Representatives, and it got voted down by and large, unfortunately, by my own party representatives. I'm a registered Democrat. I work together across party lines to get the job done. Grew up in the Merrimack Valley. We work together to make sure that we're increasing transparency and accountability. We can have a policy debate all day long. But we all should want transparency and accountability and accessibility from our government so that we can have debates about the topics that we may or may not agree on.
Sure.
But what's happening at the State House right now is even the most simple issues like this, which is just an audit turn over the documents. Let's review them. Let's make sure there's no funny business. Cross the T's, dot the I's, do what the taxpayers asked. It is becoming a politically divisive issue up on Beacon Hill right now, and you have Democratic leadership. And again, I say this as a registered Democrat. You have Democratic leadership in the House of Representatives and in the state Senate shutting down the will of the voters on purpose to block transparency, to block accountability. And the Republican side did vote on this in the House of Representatives and in the state Senate, and they haven't voted on it in the Senate yet, but in the House, that's where it came up so far, and they have been supportive of this. And then there was one lone Democrat representative from Plymouth, Michelle Badger. She deserves a shout out.
All right, awesome.
It is not easy to take a vote against the Speaker of the House. I know from personal experience, for years of serving in the House of Representatives and years of voting off from the Speaker, that you are retaliated against, and they do isolate you, and they do try to bully you out of doing that. But they did have an opportunity, is my point, Mike, and they didn't vote for this. And let me tell you something. This is something that got support across the political spectrum on the ballot. The Republican Party of Massachusetts, the Mass GOP, and the state Democratic Committee voted for this. So both parties endorsed this audit initiative. And across the board in Massachusetts, you saw the most liberal groups, the most conservative groups that endorsed against me for my run for office, that were like, no way, we don't want her. And they supported my opponents, whether it was in the whether it was in the general election or in the primary. But when we were working on this issue, we adulted, all put our differences aside on all this other stuff and said, hey, like, we all agree on this, right? This is something where we all need access. Whether you're the most liberal person in Massachusetts or the most conservative, we want access. And we came together. We had endorsements from Mass Fiscal Alliance for this and Progressive Mass for this. The most left and the most right organizations in the state, right? So people came together. And it's important to make sure that we continue to have this conversation in this way. This is a nonpartisan issue. So when we do talk about some of these leaders, so-called leaders, acting more like dictators these days, shutting down these transparency initiatives, they are not acting in a democratic fashion. They are acting in a self-serving, power-hungry fashion that, is going against the will of the voters. But it is not reflective of either party. It's reflective of a broken system of governance up on Beacon Hill, where absolute power has corrupted absolutely in this circumstance. So we need more accountability on Beacon Hill. And in order to have that, we really need people putting aside their partisan differences and coming together to hold Beacon Hill accountable. Because up on Beacon Hill, it's no longer about Democrat or Republican. It is about those with power and the rest of us. And yeah, we have our elected representatives going up there and they're affiliated with a certain party, sure. But the conversations are controlled by just a handful of people up there. And that's what needs to change. And this audit is just one way, Mike, that we are able to increase access in some way to what's going on behind the curtain. It is not the saving grace for what's going on at the State House or in our legislature, but it is one way that we can pierce through that curtain and see what is going on behind those closed doors when it comes to the use of our tax dollars. And again, we've only asked for financial documents and state contracts up to this point, and that's what they're saying is unconstitutional. I mean, look, if we're going down certain rabbit holes that they say we think that the line might be being crossed here, we feel like this is influencing our ability to do our jobs, we'll have that conversation all day long. We don't, as auditors, go into different state agencies and start doing the roles of the people working in those agencies. We're there to look at, again, those processes, those procedures, how we can improve performance. And if you don't want that, and if you're saying no, that you're not going to turn over financial documents when it comes to our taxpayer dollars, what are you hiding? What are you so afraid of?
Wait, I have a question.
Yes.
So financial documents and state contracts. So for instance, we don't know much about illegal immigration here in Massachusetts. It's very hidden, and I hear that they're being put up in hotels with contracts we don't know about. Is that what you mean? Like that?
So
kind
in
of
the
stuff going
migrant
on?
crisis right now, when it comes to these hotels, our office has a particular role to play, and that is to make sure that we are conducting audits of the use of our taxpayer funds, yes, with contracts as well. And I will say this, we are auditing aspects of the emergency shelter system right now as it stands, and we will be, hopefully sooner rather than later, releasing that report. People want transparency. They want to know how things are getting done. They want to know that their tax dollars are not being abused. We do hear often that folks want a full financial forensic audit. And before the show started, Annie, you and I got to talk about how our office isn't able to conduct forensic financial audits. So we are going to be likely to be recommending to the Senate and the House of Representatives that if they are looking to see a full forensic financial audit of the financials regarding the emergency shelter system right now, that they do set aside some funds for that. It's looking like it's going to be between $1.5 to $2.5 million to get that level of an audit done. But our office is able to do a performance audit looking at certain aspects that have been raised to us as high-risk areas, and we are doing that right now. And while we're not able to, as I was telling Mike earlier, talk about the results of those audits before the audits are released, we will absolutely be making all of that information public as soon as the audit is released, because we are subject to the public records law,
Yes.
unlike the state legislature. So that will all be made publicly available to you so that you know what's going on with your tax dollars.
I think that people will be really appreciative to know that, because in Massachusetts, the tax dollars that people pay is supposed to go back to the people in some way, manner, or form, correct? Like, that's the way it's supposed to work, right? So if you have $1 in, you should have $1 out for something, or a fraction of that dollar for something, right? Like, that's supposed to benefit the people, these tax dollars. And I don't know if that is necessarily happening to the level it should be happening. And it also, in regards to the audit itself, the fact is this, okay? Within the audit, it's just a glaring example that something so simple that the people voted for is not allowed to go through. What else? Like, this is like a proof of concept thing, right? This is like, if you look beyond just the audit itself and what it entails, right? What else can these people do that is not benefiting the public, right? That's my issue with this, right? So it's like, okay, we're not going to allow the audit. Well, now there's this bill or there's this, and they're not going to allow these things. You know what I'm trying to say? There's just you hit the nail on the head when you said there's just a certain group of people that are really in control here, and they're the ones that are setting the standards for everybody, including the lawmakers throughout the entire state. And it's really concerning to me. That's what's concerning to me, beside just the audit itself, is how much power these people actually have.
It should be concerning to you, and you are 1,000% right. This audit, for as much attention as it's gotten, because it was the ballot question,
Sure.
it is part of a much bigger issue that
Correct.
is going on Beacon Hill, which is this culture of power. Okay, this culture of power where you have a few people who are able to have these backroom meetings. And of course, look, Mike, people are able to have conversations, right?
Sure.
Fine. But when you are having conversations about really far-reaching legislation that's going to be law, in a matter of weeks or days or hours, and not making that information salient to people, and giving them time to actually weigh in on what they think about that before it becomes law, that is where the issue is, right? Because these decisions are impacting all of our lives, and we are being disenfranchised from what's supposed to be a democratic process, but is more of, it's more of an authoritarian regime up at the State House right now. So it is not okay what's happening. The audit is one of many things we need to be doing to increase transparency up on Beacon Hill. But it is something that's hugely important because, again, we can't even get access to how millions and millions of our taxpayer dollars are being spent in the House of Representatives and in the Senate in their budgets for themselves when it comes to, accessing things like receipts, just getting documentation that what you said you spent it on is actually what you spent it on. We do audits of, UMass, for example, right? And we did an audit of UMass Lowell recently, right down the street, right? So did an audit of UMass Lowell. You didn't really read about it or hear about it because UMass Lowell complied because it's an audit. And, they didn't throw up their arms and say, oh my God, what do you think you're doing? You're not allowed in here.
Yeah.
They just, they also didn't get the pom-poms out because it's not fun to be audited, right? But they were professional. They were respectful. They treated our staff, with the level of respect that taxpayers deserve for the work that the auditors are doing. Mm-hmm. And they gave them the documents. They did it in a timely fashion. And we were able to go in, look at what their claimed credit card expenses were, right? Mm-hmm. And then make sure that those credit card expenses were actually verified through receipts and just make sure that they matched up. And there were a couple of, discrepancies here and there. Nothing crazy. A few discrepancies. There are humans that work in all these agencies and these departments, right? So, of course, the same was true in this case. And we made a set of recommendations and said, here's a way to better document. And, if a receipt's folded and you can't see the numbers on it, make sure it's not,
Sure.
things like that, right? But that's the type of stuff that the legislature is refusing to cooperate with right now and is saying is unconstitutional. It is mind-boggling for most folks to think about that because it's not their money. It's your money.
Right.
It's your money, and it's the money of all the folks that are watching, right? So we are asking for the most basic information like we do in other state entities right now. And they are refusing and saying, we don't have to show you the receipts for how we spend your money. We don't have to show you the procurement process and procedures for how we give out millions of dollars of your tax dollars in state contracts. Mike, we have found in other state entities that folks have given out no bid contracts to folks that they also, where it's also been alleged that they have a political relationship or a friendship that should have been maybe disclosed to the Ethics Commission, for example, that could have been a conflict of interest. Now, while our office doesn't make those types of determinations, we refer those things to the State Ethics Commission. We do look at those contracts and we see whether or not they were executed correctly and in accordance with the law. In the convention center recently, when we went in and we conducted an audit, we found that there was a lot that was going out in no bid contracts, that there were hundreds of thousands of dollars that went out in no bid contracts against the law in unlawful execution of contracts. That's our money. It shouldn't just be up to a few individuals how to spend it without going through the formal legal process for how to spend those dollars. So we can look at those things in other state entities. You raised it as well, that's one of your concerns, Annie. A lot of folks are concerned that that's what's happening in the legislature, that one of the reasons why we might be being prevented from getting access is not only the arrogance of some of our elected officials right now with respect to, them treating your tax dollars like it's their personal bank account, but also with the fear, potentially, that maybe those contracts may not have been executed correctly and in accordance with the law. So I have concerns about that. I think that it's incumbent upon our legislators to make those documents public so that we all can look at them. I don't even think that it's just our office that should be able to get access to that.
Yeah.
If you call my office and you want to see procurement records and documents, we're subject to the public records law. We need to give you those documents so that you can review them, so that folks can see if they were executed in a manner consistent with the law. Right now, it's not just my office that can't review that. You also are not able to review that as tax-paying residents of this Commonwealth. So we have a crisis of transparency up at the State House, and really, we need folks to be very loud about this. We need folks to contact their legislators and contact the Attorney General as well, and please ask her to enforce the law.
I have a question. So you're asking us to contact our own legislatures, but they are fearful of retaliation against the Speaker of the House, right? So, what is that going to do if we contact our legislature? How is that even going to make a difference?
honestly, we can't give up, right? Because just because they're afraid of leadership doesn't mean we're okay with the law being broken. I think that we can have some compassion and empathy for what their circumstances are, but also say,
So we need
You
them to
still
be
need to
more
follow the law.
courageous in
yeah, I
doing what
mean,
we want.
look,
Somebody's
it
got to
is-
step up, right?
It is, okay, we get it. You may be retaliated against. However, this is the law, and we need the culture of power to be dismantled up at the State House. The power is not there for the politicians. The power is supposed to belong to the people. You know, we always saw. Remember, and I'm dating myself now because now I'm in my 40s, Mike. So this is when I was growing up.
I just turned
though.
40, okay?
Okay, well,
So
we used to
I'm
have.
with you.
Remember what was called chalkboards?
Yes.
So I just say this because it's when I talk to some folks, they're like chalkboard.
Yeah.
But chalkboards in school, right? And remember above the chalkboard, there used to be this little phrase, and it said, it was all in different colors in a banner, you know, depending on what class you're in. But I'm sure you saw this at least once. Knowledge is power. Right?
Of course.
Okay, so knowledge is power. Right now, we have a few elected officials up at the State House, a few legislators who have a lot of power, okay, consolidating that power. And they're doing that because what they are doing is hoarding the information. They're keeping the information about what's going on to themselves. And by doing so, they are hoarding the power for themselves. They're keeping that information close to their vest, and they're also thereby keeping the power close to their vest. They're not allowing folks to get access. But the power belongs to the people, not the politicians. And that is what we need our legislators to understand, is that it's great that you may have taken a vote recently that I thought was good, or that you supported this initiative or supported that initiative. That's all well and good. But there's so much that needs to be done up at the State House right now that isn't getting done because not enough people are pushing back against that culture of power. Not enough legislators are fighting to give power back to the people. Too many legislators are okay with the Senate President and Speaker holding all of that power, and we need that to change. So yes, keep calling your legislators and keep putting the pressure on. You know, I mean, some legislators may never respond to their constituents. You know, maybe it's time for those legislators to think about a career change then, right? Because if you're there to continue to support just the Speaker and Senate President, that's not what the job calls you to do. You're supposed to be representing your constituents to the state,
Right.
not representing the state to your constituents. I always had people say, what does being a state representative and being a state senator mean? And they would say, oh, you represent the state, right? That's what they would say to me, and I would have to correct and say, I do not represent the state. I represent the people to the state. We are your elected voices. Your elected officials are called to represent the people, not the politicians. And right now we have too many legislators more interested in representing what the political viewpoint of the politicians is, and that needs to change.
I think I talked about this briefly yesterday, and I've obviously talked about this before in the past, but, you know, I think what I see happen here in Massachusetts is that, you know, the Democratic Party really has a stronghold on this state. And the fact is, when you don't have like a balance or some levels of a balance, it's very hard to get anything done. Right? Because there's just not enough pushback from one side or the other side. And it's gone, you know, this is something that's just gone far too long, to the point where now the people are becoming affected by this. And in my opinion, the audit is a glaring example of what is happening. And it leaves people powerless, right? And as I said earlier, that lack of power could eventually translate to other things that may be important to the people. But as you just stated, it seems as though these people are more interested, or their own self-interests, or protecting. I feel like, honestly, everybody's there just patting each other on the back. Like, that's how it feels to me, as an outsider looking in, right?
You know what I used to get told? I used to get told when I served in the legislature for 10 years and I had the most independent voting record in the legislature, stay in the barrel. That's what people would say to me. Stay in the barrel. And what they meant was, if you pop your head out of that barrel where everybody else is swimming in the tank, so to speak, that's what they also call it, swimming in the tank. You pop your head up, you put a target right on your forehead. and you'll get taken out. And that's what they've told me for years, and that's what they say to a lot of folks who are
That's what people tell me.
trying to be independently minded. And I think, Mike, look, we can agree, we can disagree, we can have a healthy and robust debate about something and a discussion and do it respectfully. But that's not happening up at the State House. A lot of folks, when they think they're running for these offices, they think that they're running to actually represent their values in their communities. But what ends up happening is they get sucked into that system. The metaphorical Kool-Aid is passed around during legislator training when everybody is told essentially, do as you're told, stay in the tank, don't light yourself on fire by disagreeing too much. You want to be a team player. And it becomes pretty much unheard of for people to vote off from what the Speaker or the Senate President does. And that is absolutely ridiculous. You talk to people that are just, workers out in our communities, and they're like, what are you talking about? That they go in and they just do exactly what one person says. But that is what's happening. It is absolutely ridiculous. It's unacceptable, but that's the way it is. That's the culture at the State House right now. And that's what we have to get the word out about, is that we are not having real debates at the State House. Once in a while, you might see something where, somebody gets really passionate about something and they decide they're going for it. They're quickly retaliated against, knocked back into line, or they end up leaving the legislature, is what happens. Because it is not a space where debate is encouraged, where disagreement is encouraged. It is very much groupthink mentality. And I do refer to it very often as a cult-like atmosphere. And I tell people, I grew up in very, very conservative churches growing up, and my mom was 17 when she had me. And thank God we had people in the community and family members who stepped up. My aunts and uncles are awesome, and they pitched in, right? But my mom relied on the church for a lot of stuff when I was growing up. And I got a lot out of that experience that was really great, and a lot that was not so great. And the not so great side was a lot of this, a lot of the control aspects of, what are you doing with your free time? And, this is bad and that's bad. I remember walking out of my house one day and somebody was so upset because I listened to a Whitney Houston song, and it was, how dare you listen to this secular music, and you need to repent. And I remember just thinking, man, I can't even step out of my house or listen to music without it just being a sin according to this group of leaders, right? And, I left that, setting. But the reality is that having experienced that during my childhood, during my teen years, during my upbringing, I think when I got elected to the legislature, and hindsight's 2020, and I haven't really gotten the opportunity to talk about this as much as I would like, but, I look at my experience in the legislature, and I always wondered why it bothered me so much that I was being told to do things that I thought were wrong. And I was being told to go against my thoughts on something and to go against my own value systems and just agree with this leader, so-called leader. And I really think I was triggered during that time period in the legislature because of that experience.
I think so.
And I was sitting there going, this is ridiculous. This is like a cult. And it's like we have cult leaders here that are telling people, drink the Kool-Aid or you're ostracized, or make sure that you're following the leader, or we're going to kick you out, or you're bad, and that's not okay. It's really, really disturbing what is going on right now in that building. And we need people to fight back, and we need people to help our legislators to, get some more courage to be able to stand up, because it's not easy. Empathize with them, give them some compassion, but also call them and tell them that they do need to stand up, and that it is breaking the law, and that we do expect them to follow the will of the voters, that we understand that it's very culty and that it's very much groupthink there, and that they probably, will be retaliated against. But we need our representatives to start standing up on behalf of the people. Otherwise, we might as well just have the Senate president and speaker running the entire state, right? So, I mean, this is what is supposed to be happening in the legislature. It's not happening, and we need to call for action.
So, one more question for you.
Sure.
The writ of, is it writ of mandamus? Is that how you pronounce that?
Yes, writ of mandamus, I think.
Mandamus? I don't know.
I could be saying it
We're
the wrong
winging
way,
it.
too.
We're winging it here.
Yes.
So I know that you've looked into this, right? So could you at least explain what it is and if it's effective or not?
Yes. So we don't know if it's absolutely going to be effective. We are we're trying every single thing that we can to try to make sure that action is taken. What's actually occurred is our office has repeatedly sought the assistance of our Attorney General. She has repeatedly turned us down. And she hasn't formally turned us down yet because, that would be unpopular with the voters of Massachusetts who 72% said wanted this audit to happen. But the Attorney General has had every opportunity to stand up for the voters on this and say that the lawmakers need to follow the law on this matter. She's refused to do so. She keeps putting the onus back on my office and claiming that we're not answering her questions. We absolutely are answering her questions. It's just, Mike, that every time we answer the questions, more questions come along. And the Attorney General seems more focused on the scope of our audit and on what we are doing as our job than on drafting the legal analysis for this, which is her job. So we are asking the Attorney General to do her job and let us do our job. We write the scope, we do the scope of the audit, we set the scope of the audit. Our office is full of the auditors that they're professionals, they know how to do this in accordance with the law. The Attorney General's job is to conduct a legal analysis and then to bring this to court if people are violating the law. She is the state's top law enforcement officer of this Commonwealth, but she is not helping. I don't think she's planning on helping at any point. And we've gotten to this point where we are at a standstill. And I have been publicly trying to, calling for action and ensure that people are calling the Attorney General. I'm still going to ask anybody watching today, please keep calling the Attorney General. She is very frustrated with me right now. And I get it, but we need to keep calling until action is taken and know that we are answering all of her questions to the best of our ability. But we believe that every time we answer questions, that it's just being planned on being used against us. The Attorney General actually sided with the legislature the last time we tried to conduct an audit and wrote, I think it was around like a 17-page defense of the Speaker and Senate President's right to deny the audit from being conducted. So we're not really expecting that to change, but we do need the Attorney General to at least allow us to get access to a special assistant Attorney General, which is just an attorney that would represent us in lieu of her representing us. And that way we can at least go to court on our own. The way the law works is we have to go through the AG's office to get access to a court. And the reason why the AG still hasn't acted is we believe that she's trying to obstruct our access to court like she did the last time around before we did this ballot question. So unfortunately, we can't get access to a court formally. So folks like Elijah D'Souza, who you spoke with recently, are looking into filing a writ of mandamus in order to require that the Attorney General does her job and require that the legislature complies with this audit. What that is essentially it's just a legal requirement that
the people
they
sign
do
that,
their
right?
jobs.
Like it involves the people, right?
Any resident can go file that in the courts, is my understanding. So Elijah
He's having trouble.
Took this up.
He said he's having trouble because no lawyer will take it.
Yes.
No lawyer will help him once they find out.
So he can file it, but what happened is he essentially went to go file it. He had some conversations that basically resulted in his understanding that there needed to be more to the writ than what was in it. And he wants to make sure that it's robust, that it's done correctly. So yes, he is seeking some legal guidance, some advice for that. And
We might know some attorneys.
So send them his way, because
Okay.
he is working on this and he does need some assistance.
So you were talking about the AG for a while, and then you also touched on you may have to bypass. Is that you could do that? Could you bypass the AG and hire your own attorney to?
It's actually really disheartening to say this, but I'm not able to. According to law, we are required to go through the Attorney General's office.
Oh, so you have to. Okay.
So the Attorney General could allow
Even if
me.
they're obstructing this from happening?
That's why the writ of mandamus is being filed, because that is to mandate
now
that
it's
they
coming together.
actually do their
we
jobs.
had trouble
yeah.
understanding this, so
Okay.
Yes,
yeah. Okay.
no, and it is challenging to understand, and
Right.
I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this because it's a lot. But the reason why the writ of mandamus is being filed is to require that the AG actually takes action. Now, it doesn't require her to take our side, to take the people's side in this. If she doesn't want to take the side of the people and represent us in this case, she doesn't have to, but she does need to stop obstructing our access to the courts. And that's what we're asking for. We're asking for access to the courts.
So if she does that, and after this writ is filed, I guess what would happen is if she continues to do that, would that provide an opportunity for you to act otherwise and not
And get
potentially
that
use it?
special assistant thing that you were talking about, special.
If she would actually allow us to get our own special assistant attorney general,
Yeah.
which would mean we could essentially choose an attorney, then we would be able to get access to court and sue the legislature. But again, this is the attorney general's responsibility, and
Right, of course.
we're calling on her to fulfill her obligations to the Commonwealth.
And how long is this has been going on since this started, basically, right?
Look, the only reason why we had to bring this to the ballot was because the Attorney General prevented us from being able to sue them to begin with. We asked for access to the court. The Attorney General acted as a judge, violating the separation of powers, violating the Constitution, and she herself made the determination on behalf of a court about what she thought about the audit being conducted. And she said, I don't believe the audit can be conducted. That's my decision, and I'm not going to allow you to proceed to court. So she acted as a judge, acted as a judiciary, violated the separation of powers. In doing so, violated the Constitution, and simultaneously accused my office of potentially someday maybe violating the Constitution as the reason why we were being blocked from the audit.
This is a do as I say, don't do as I do situation, right?
It's really unfortunate. It's. I would be remiss not to mention too, Mike. The legislature audits the executive branch. So every time they say it's unconstitutional for the executive, any executive office, even a constitutional office like mine, which is only answers directly to the people. I do not. The governor is not in charge of the auditor's office. The people are in charge of the auditor's office because it's an elected position, and we are the people's auditors. The legislature will continually say, well, the executive branch can't audit the legislative branch. But a lot of folks don't realize, because they keep trying to not talk about this, that the legislature has a post-audit and oversight committee that actually audits executive branch agencies. And we can send you reports through the years where they have actually had legislative auditors auditing the governor's boards and commissions and writing performance audits on what they think about the performance aspects of the administration. Now, they've been allowed to do that, and they think that that's constitutional, and they've held hearings, and they have subpoena authority over the administration, over the executive branch. But when anybody from the executive branch wants to provide checks and balances back, it's all of a sudden a constitutional issue. Give me a break. It's the epitome of hypocrisy, and people see that, and that's why people voted to the tune of 72% to make sure that this audit happens. The Office of State Auditor always audited the legislature. It's only been in recent years that they stopped allowing these audits to occur. We saw a period of scandal and corruption. We know that the legislature is frequently ranked as the least transparent in the nation, the least effective as well. It is time for bold and meaningful change. And in order to get that, we do need to keep coming back together. We need to keep beating this drum. So that's why I'm so grateful to come on here today with you, to talk to working people in the Commonwealth, to ask for your continued support. They will tell you that they do their own audits. Let me tell you, when you hear that, what they mean by that is that the speaker gets to control the scope, the audit topics of those audits, and what is actually released to you and not released to you. That's what they want. They want their own auditor to be able to look at stuff so that they can control what you see and what you don't see.
That's why they keep asking for that.
Yes, that's why they keep asking for that. So that was actually made clear in the ballot guidebook, by the way, where the legislature was allowed to put in propaganda, essentially, for all the ballot questions about what they thought about these ballot questions. They were given a lot of space to go on and on about all the bad things they thought about this ballot question. We got a nice little paragraph or two. I think it was like 100 to 150 words we were given. But we did, say our piece, and we actually said it to the voters when they made their decision. We said they work through a private, a contract. They contract out their auditing services right now, but they can control the aspects of that audit. That is why we are asking the voters to weigh in on whether or not you want the Constitutional Office of State Auditor to conduct audits like we always used to be able to. And the voters said, yes, we do. Now, that doesn't mean that those other audits, can't occur, that they can't have their own internal auditors or contract out with a private vendor. But we need to make sure that we're not allowing the Speaker and Senate President to control every aspect about what's being examined and not examined, and then control every aspect about what's being released if something is found. Because our office, once again, is subject to public records law. They're not. So if they find something that they don't want to release to you, they're not ever required to tell you about it. They can keep it hidden forever. Whereas if our office audits, it is a matter of public record for you and you get access to that information.
I think people don't necessarily know that. Like, you know what I mean? Working class, a lot of people, I did not know that.
Me neither. I read that in the book that I got. I didn't understand. So you just clarified it for me.
Well, people aren't talking about audits every day, right? I mean,
Right.
Nobody's ever heard so much about audits in their entire
key.
life.
This is like the key, though, right? Like this
I
is
wish it was explained to us easily online.
Yeah. This is so. We're almost at an hour. Is there anything else that you want to say, or?
I just want to say, please keep coming together. I know there's so much that divides us, and I see leaders on Beacon Hill weaponizing the party system for their own gain. And what I hear a lot from Beacon Hill right now is people using Democrat and Republican to divide the people of Massachusetts, to try to make issues that are not partisan, and to try to use it to maintain control and maintain power for themselves. And what I mean by that is exactly this. Look, this audit, I think, demonstrated that very clearly. You have people who have a label next to their name, but they're not actually representing the people, the people in the general public who also might have that label next to their name, right? And what they're doing is they are trying to ascribe, they're trying to essentially say that their behaviors are Democratic or Republican or whatever they are, in order to sell that to the general public and to further divide people so they can maintain control. So I would just say people need to come together. They need to look beyond the party system right now. Obviously we have our values, and we need to stand by our values, and we need to stand by, what's important to us and advocate for those things. But we need to also realize that up on Beacon Hill right now, there are a few people who have a lot of power who are trying to divide us and trying to keep us from talking to each other about where we do agree on things. And where we agree is on these matters of transparency, on these matters of accountability, on matters of accessibility, wanting access to what's going on, want to have a seat at the table. Those are the things that we can all and should all agree on. So keep coming together on those things. And, if you can't agree on everything else, put those topics aside for the moment, right? And focus on getting this stuff done, because we need to make progress on Beacon Hill. And, if we don't come together, they're going to continue to be able to divide us.
That's very well put. That is.
It was okay. It was a
It
little
was pretty
wordy,
good.
but it's okay.
No. All right. You want to wrap
been
it
a
up?
long week.
We'll wrap it up with that. Just make sure everybody gets out there and makes those phone calls and, still advocate for this, because I think there's still a possibility that this could go through. But without the public's help, we're in trouble. So
We
thanks.
need everybody to call your legislators, call the Attorney General. And know as well, folks, we are looking into other options. So folks have said, well, why haven't you done this? Why haven't you done that? I am working on 18 different angles at once to try to tackle this. I do need folks to understand I'm not an attorney, so it's been challenging to navigate some of the legal aspects of this because I don't have folks necessarily offering pro bono work all the time to just draft these things on behalf of the Attorney General who won't take action right now. But we do have advocates in the community who are working alongside of us. We have folks who are offering volunteer assistance, and that help continues to come in. So the more that help continues to come in, the more quickly we can get the stuff drafted and filed, and hopefully eventually move forward and make sure that the law is enforced.
That's it. That's how it is.
Thanks so much.
Yeah. Thanks,
was
guys.
really insightful.
That was crazy
That's
what's
a
going
lot.
on. It is crazy what's going on. Ryan, you could cut it, buddy.